What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have a collection update for you. And this one, we're going to finally get into that whole Florida run that I did, but first we have some newer releases that I didn't get a chance to go over. I had some stuff show up in orders that, I wasn't here for clearly because I was down in Florida, and I also have some Metalhead box stuff too as well. So yeah, a lot to go over, and we're just going to get this one started. Druadan, the Loremaster's Time / The End of Colors EP. This is one that I got in the Metalhead box. This is a compilation of the first EP and first full length from this Finnish one-man dungeon synth / black metal project. I would say it's mostly dungeon synth. Now, I am not like the biggest fan of dungeon synth. I really haven't dove that much into it, but the stuff that I have checked out, kind of wishy-washy on, and this one I really wasn't a fan of. In terms of metallic elements, like it does say it is black metal on the archives, but I only got like a little bit of that. And it's mostly in the first half, which is mostly comprised of the Loremaster's Time. Like you do have some heavier guitars and like some more ambient guitars and, very ghoulish vocals. But for the most part, this is, just droning synths and ambience. It's very slow moving to the point where it really starts to drag, and there's lots of samples of like battle and, nature sounds, and I just really couldn't get into it. It does have like some slightly more, I guess, like kind of like doom-laden moments, like the Whispering Moon and the Loremaster's Tale, the title track on at least the first half. But I gotta say, like, not a lot of this was very engaging, and it's also like really long. Like these songs tend to drag a lot, like, just drawn out atmospheric sections of pleasant melodies and synths and like canned 80s drums. I mean, yeah, this definitely wasn't for me. Like, this is like ASMR black metal. Like, yeah, we just put this on and it kind of just whispers evil in your ear because nothing on here kind of gives you that sort of like black metal intensity. Like, I know that's probably not the idea behind this project, but I don't know. I feel like the idea behind this project was to score a medieval themed video game from like 2002. To me, this screams like more background music than anything else. Like, it really doesn't jump out at you at any point. It's kind of like one of those like new age, like just like nature sound CDs where, it just plays very calming noise to fall asleep to, I guess. It's really not like spooky enough to put on at a Halloween party to kind of add some ambiance. But yeah, I just really wasn't a fan of this. And, I'm not going to base like all dungeon synth on this. Like, I do want to check out some more just so I can get a better read on the whole subset as is. But yeah, I just really couldn't get into this. It's just not my style. But I mean, if you're a giant dungeon synth fan and you like interesting one-man projects that have like a big folky touch to them, I guess, check this out. I'm not entirely sure how easy this is to find, since I would assume this is probably a Metalhead box exclusive. This looks like it was self-released. There's no label attached to it, but I'm sure that this guy's stuff is out there, so check it out. Give it a whirl. Maybe you'll really dig it, but this was definitely not for me. Verit Terrace, The Dark Horizon. This is the second album from this Seattle-based melodic death metal act, yet another one that I got in the Metalhead box. There's been a lot of good, like, retro melodic death popping up here lately. Like, I'm still, like, big on that new At Pawn Stone album. And this one is a little bit different than that one. There's, a lot of variety within melodic death metal. And this one almost kind of occupies, like, more of that territory you'd hear in, like, Finnish melodic death metal that kind of has, like, a little bit brighter of a sound, like Omnium Gatherum. I think like Norther would be a good comparison too. While the vocals are harsh, they're pretty intense throughout. The music itself has like more of that major chord driven sound where it kind of sounds a bit brighter overall. Like, tons of hooks, tons of great leads. The songs are fast for the most part and very intense, but the riffs and music itself just feels like a bit brighter. Like, this is the kind of melodic death metal where, I mean, honestly, if you swapped out the harsher vocals in favor of like flat out clean singing a la power metal, it would still kind of fit. In fact, I think it probably would fit and kind of maybe fall into like the US power metal realm where it's just like a little bit heavier. A lot of these songs just have like a big triumphant vibe, like Celestial Darkness, Blinding. Yeah, the song titles sound a bit more, you know, dark and negative, but honestly, like the vibe on them is like, wow, this makes me want to go out and do something. Like, you know, I feel like I need to have a small victory over something, like, I don't know, like mow the lawn or something. Maybe something a little bit more grandiose than mow the lawn, but maybe I'm just saying that because I probably do need to mow my lawn, but I'm here recording a video. Now, there are some clean vocals on this one on Last Rites, and I gotta say, it was a little odd listening to them and then looking up that they were from Seattle, because honestly, they sound like they have like Scandinavian accents. Like they sound like they could be from Sweden or Norway. Kind of just take your pick of that whole area of Europe. There's what seems like an accent there. And I don't know if that's like intentional or, you know, the guy doing the clean vocals is, you know, actually from that area and moved to the US, but I don't know, it made it feel, I don't know, like a little bit more authentic. Like if you had told me this band was from Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, whatever, I would probably believe you. But I would probably still lean more towards Finland just because, again, there's that kind of like folky undertone, and again, it's, I don't know, like, I wouldn't call it happy, but again, like more rousing and victorious. Oddly enough, though, the song that kind of screamed, you know, a little bit more dark and sinister, a little bit more of that straight up like kind of death metal sort of vibe, albeit still very much melodic death metal, was the last track, Light in the Darkness. The one that has the brighter name is the one that sounds like the darkest and most sinister. And it's really solid. In fact, it has some really good clean female vocals on it. Kind of gives it like a, you know, more gothic vibe too. Overall, this was a pretty solid listen though. I really enjoyed it. It's got a good fast, energetic pace throughout. The songs are catchy. Again, kind of reminds me a bit of Omnium Gatherum and a little bit of Norther. If that band's even still around, I don't even really know. And at its like heaviest moments, I would say like there's definitely a bit of like dark tranquility in there. And there's even some more technical flourishes that are maybe a little bit more comparable to Legion. But yeah, overall, this was a solid listen. If you just like straight up mellow death and you like it like extra hooky, check this out. Pretty solid listen. Greenleaf, The Head and the Habit. This is the 9th album from this Swedish retro rock, stoner rock acts. I've been a fan of them since, God, 2012 when they put out Nest of Vipers. That was the first one I picked up. I saw it compared to a lot of bands that I really liked, and I've been a fan ever since. And yeah, this is another fun slab of groovy, very 70s inspired retro rock, big fuzzy guitars, very classic rock sounding. And yeah, once again, this band just kind of just nails their sound. They really haven't changed all that much throughout their career. Maybe occasionally getting like a little bit heavier in certain albums, but for the most part, this band just does flat out 70s rock with big riffy hooks, great crooned vocals, lots of kind of stony, spacey atmosphere. Kind of comparable to Clutch in a lot of ways, but this band also has connections to bands like Dozer, Demon Cleaner, and Truck Fighters, so there's a lot of that hefty stoner fuzz to it. You definitely get a bit more of that vibe on like the breakdown on Avalanche. It slows it down, the riffs get droney, and they just seem extra fuzzy. And for the most part, this album is very up-tempo. I was kind of surprised by that because these guys, you know, they definitely have their, you know, more raucous songs where they're, you know, kind of like picking up the pace a little bit and kind of getting people moving. But there's a lot of stuff that kind of just stays groovy. It's very, again, like blues rock oriented, but a lot of this is very energetic, and I really like that. You do have your more quiet, intimate moments, like that Obsidian Grin, which is just like an isolated guitar and bluesy crooning. It's very haunting, kind of like Clutch's Gone Cold a bit. I don't know, this whole album is just flat out fun. Like, you know, the heavier moments, I guess you could say, Oh Dandelion is, you know, a bit more, I don't know, slightly aggressive. Like, I wouldn't call this a metal band by any stretch. This is a flat-out rock band, but it definitely has its more, you know, aggressive moments, I guess you could say. And while that song is, like, you know, a little bit heavier, it's mostly about that kind of blues rock swagger. But one of my personal favorites on here is probably The Tricking Tree. That one has, like, just this awesome, long, extended bridge where it just becomes a giant jam session. I believe it's the longest track in the album. Flat out amazing songwriting, all about the mood and the vibe, and you can just kind of sit back and chill to it, like, you know, heavy on the Sabbath vibes. I am a big fan of this album. I'm a big fan of all their albums, though. Like, this band just has a sound that they nail every time, and I've yet to be really disappointed by this band. If you are a big fan of, I would say, again, Clutch, I would even throw in, like, Witchcraft in there, too. It's kind of got that retro vibe. Graveyard, stuff like that. Check this band out. Check out this album. Check out any of their albums, honestly. But, yeah, this wouldn't be a bad starting point. Horseburner, Voice of Storms. This is the fourth album from this West Virginia-based stoner metal, I guess like stoner prog metal act. I was a big fan of their last album, The Thief. It was on my West Virginia States of Metal. And when I saw this band was coming out with a new album, I was excited to go over it. Unfortunately, it came at a time where there were so many other releases the week it dropped that we just didn't have time to cover it, but I was going to cover this in one form or another. You could draw a lot of comparisons to Mastodon and Baroness on this one. They have, again, that sort of like, you know, mix between like heavier sections with lots of just big, sludgy, just dirty sounding riffs, but also those huge, like almost kind of like classic heavy metal harmonies you hear that Baroness will put in, and kind of that proggy song structure that you would get maybe more in Mastodon, kind of all blended together. Two vocalists on here, both of them kind of occupy slightly different territory, like they do distinguish themselves from one another, but they also harmonize really well together. And the songs are just riffy as hell. Like, every song on here is just driven by just incredible guitar play. The tone of the guitars, too, is, you know, it kind of lurks in territory somewhere between stoner metal and sludge metal. Like, it still has, like, that stoner metal warmth to it, but it also has, like, a little bit more of that sludge metal sort of like chunkiness. So when they get down to like some more aggressive moments on here, there's like an additional heft that you wouldn't necessarily get with like a flat out stoner metal sort of like fuzzy tone. But I would say like the main draw on here, the main thing that kept me like just entranced is melody. This album has such a great sense of melody, and in different ways. Songs like Hidden Bridges and Widow, The Hunt, and The Prize both really kind of latch onto like classic heavy metal harmonies. There's a lot of like, you know, new wabum sort of intensity to it. It almost sounds like a more rustic Appalachian Iron Maiden. The song The Fawn is a more acoustic driven song, and honestly, it kind of reminds me of like classic prog bands. Like, this is something you could 100% hear on like a Yes album. And the song Diana makes great use of these tremolo harmonies. It gives it this very wide atmospheric sound. It just sounds flat out beautiful. And again, you have these constantly shifting vocals and harmonies and trade-offs. This album is just flat out incredible sounding, and in terms of songwriting, I think this might be their best one yet. Now granted, I haven't heard their first two. I started with The Thief and I was blown away by that, and I kind of just forgot about the band for a while. But after listening to this one, I definitely want to get their other two albums. This is just fantastic stoner prog. Like, again, it kind of fits right in with like Baroness and Mastodon specifically. If you were a big fan of those two bands in particular, you are going to find a lot of stuff on here that you really like. So yeah, strongly recommend checking this one out. Could be a year ender. I don't know. I still need some more time with it. But yeah, this is fantastic nonetheless. Replicare, The Center That Cannot Hold. This is the third album from this Boston-based technical death metal act. I own their second album, Do Not Deviate. This band drew my attention initially because this features James Dorton of Black Crown Initiate on vocals. And when I heard of this band, I was already a giant fan of Black Crown Initiate, which this is kind of interesting because when I was, you know, looking for stuff on this band, I found out a couple of things. First off, the name, which I thought was like, I don't know, like maybe French or Latin for something. It is actually the name of the guitarist and founding member Eric Alper spelled backwards. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And I also found out that Andy Thomas has actually rejoined Black Crown Initiate after leaving the band, God, like a few years ago to essentially join Rivers of Nile, which he is in that band right now, and Black Crown Initiate. So I wasn't kind of sure about the whole status of Black Crown Initiate in terms of being a functioning band. But with Andy Thomas back in the band, there's like a bit of a like sigh of relief there that that band is continuing on, because I love Black Crown Initiate. But anyway, let's talk about Replicare. This is some absolutely crazy tech death that actually, you know, kind of borders on progressive death metal at spots. There's a lot of like very intricate songwriting, of course, stuff you would expect from tech death, like, you know, crazy solos, arpeggios. polyrhythms all over the place, but there's also like some progressive metal leanings in terms of like clean vocal passages and just, you know, song structure that doesn't just scream like blasty tech death. Drag Yourself Along the Earth in particular just feels a little bit more like moody. It's not so much about the techie riffs, it's more about the atmosphere and kind of sounding a little bit more dark. But a lot of this is just buck nutty when it comes down to like, you know, clever rhythms and such. That opening breakdown on the title track is just absolutely nuts, and how James Dorton's vocals really follow those breakdowns well, because there's, again, a lot of like crazy tempo shifts and wild riff transitions, and he matches them really well, and he has this very powerful, commanding vocal style. Like, it's more of a giant roar, it's very intelligible, and his cadences can be just insanely quick. And something that he doesn't necessarily get a chance to show off as much just because Andy Thomas's cleans in Black Crown Initiate are incredible. He actually does a lot of like clean crooning on here, and it's really solid. A Fine Manipulation and Horde, the Trauma like Wealth. Wow, that's a really dark title. But yeah, he has some really awesome crooned vocals on there. And I don't know, like this album just feels a lot bigger than I would say the last one. And there is like a little bit of carryover, I would say, more so from Black Crown Initiate, though I would say this album is way more vicious and way more brutal at times. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here that I could probably compare to like Cryptopsy in terms of just how outright savage it is. I really enjoy the way this album is paced. It doesn't feel like too congested with like overtly technical moments just to show off how good of players they are. Like, you kind of know how good they are just kind of early on. But I like the fact that they show it off with like, you know, clever riff structure, songwriting, rather than just like, look how many notes I can hit in this one measure. I like this style of tech death, and this album is awesome. I think this one is actually a little bit better than the last one too. If you're a big fan, again, of like Cryptopsy, I would say Gorod. Gorod is actually pretty comparable on this one. Check this album out. I think this is a fantastic piece of work, and yeah, looking forward to hearing more from this band and Black Crown Initiate, and I guess like Rivers and Nile too in the future. But yeah, check this out. Absolute Disgrace, Corpse Kingdom. This is the lone full length from this Brazilian technical, brutal death metal, death grind act. This kicks off the Tampa stuff. This was a blind buy. I just checked him out. I looked him up on the archives. Like, all right, this sounds kind of interesting. And yeah, this is just kind of batshit crazy. I would say it's kind of comparable to like Cryptopsy, maybe a little bit of Malignancy, though like not as smooth. Like, this is very jagged sounding, lots of like distant atonal riffs and then like grindy fits. Some of the stuff on here kind of sounds like a more grindcore oriented Immolation a bit. Like, there's a lot of those like weird, you know, distant riffs and melodies on there, but it's all played at kind of like a grind-like speed, like frequent blast beats, just crazy transitions. I guess you could say it kind of borders on tech death, but it's not like super tight. Like, it's kind of got that grindcore or death grind looseness to it, where it's like intentionally gritty and maybe like a little bit sloppy, or at least to the point where they wanted it to sound like not super pristine. The song Condemned in particular is just nuts. The transitions on there are absolutely bonkers at times. You get these weird runs of ascending and descending tremolos and these squealed accents. Again, like kind of similar to Malignancy, but it's, again, like more grind-laden just because, I don't know, like it feels, I don't know, just kind of dirty sounding. Like it's a punk band playing tech death. Or maybe like, you know, Cephalic Carnage, but maybe without like the hooks, because, you know, Cephalic Carnage was really good about like throwing in like catchy riffs amidst their storm of just insane death grind. This, like most of the bands that I've, you know, named here, it's brutal, it's very challenging, but this isn't as memorable, I would say. Well, I will say that one song in particular was pretty memorable. The song Menstruation Sucker, which features some adult movie samples in there. And I have to say the slurp and burp at the end was the cherry on top. I won't forget that soundbite. That'll probably stay with me for a while, honestly. And yeah, I will say the last track, When the Food Tries to Survive, it kind of feels like, you know, just an add-on, like it's just this extra little outro bit. It really doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense, but I don't know, like this album's just kind of strange. Like, there's a lot of stuff that sounds like it, but it's not as well done as the bands that I would compare it to. But still, I'd say check it out if you're a big fan of, like, again, like Cryptopsy, Malignancy, you know, just very, like, technical, brutal, and just outright vicious music. You might find some stuff you really enjoy in here. To me, I think this is just kind of okay. I don't know if this would be, like, retro review material in the future, but still, it was kind of a fun listen. And again, that sample, it just is not going to leave my head for a while. But either way, check it out. It's still pretty decent. Except Restless and Wild. This is the 4th album from these German heavy metal legends. I've been meaning to get some more classic Accept in my collection, and this is a great palate cleanse after the last Accept album, which I just did not like at all. But often this one is cited as Accept's best work, and I gotta agree, in terms of all the Accept albums I've listened to, I think this one is probably the best one so far. Fast as a Shark. That opening track absolutely whoops ass. I love the fact that it starts with this weird record pull in terms of an intro, like it's playing, I don't know, some, like, you know, 60s bullshit or something, I don't know. But you get that record scratch and then bam, you're into what I would call, like, thrash metal riffs. Like, that song, I would say, is kind of a thrash metal song. Like, that song is just, I don't know, meaner and faster than kind of what you expect from, like, a lot of classic heavy metal. The guitar tone itself has got more of a big old crunch to it, like definitely a lot of Judas Priest comparisons. In fact, this album kind of runs a bit like British Steel, except it doesn't have, you know, a terrible song like United on it. Lots of great galloping riffs. The title track, is it Flash Rockin' Man? I don't know what that means. Demon's Night. Just big classic heavy metal riffs. It kind of comes across as maybe like a bit grittier version of Judas Priest. I've always had like sort of a love-hate relationship with Udo's vocals, but on here he sounds really good. Definitely has a lot more range than I would say like a lot of the later stuff that I've heard from Udo. And I just say he flat out sounds strong in like every facet. The songwriting, I mean, Wolf Hoffman, the dude is a hell of a riff writer, and I love his flair for neoclassical play in his lead work, and that's kind of all over here. I think he goes to that wheelhouse a lot more here lately, especially with the last two. Like, I swear I just hear like him just doing like tributes to Bach and Beethoven in every lead now. These are a little bit more wide-ranging, like he still gets those like kind of classic, gritty, heavy metal leads, but then he peppers in just a little bit of like neoclassical play. I even like the more sleazy rockers like Get Ready and Don't Go Stealing My Soul Away. Don't Go Stealing My Soul Away even has like a cowbell on it. And I know this band was, you know, very influenced by AC/DC, and you can really hear it in those songs. And it's, you know, I don't know, just like a little bit better than it has been here recently. Like, you know, the last couple albums, you know, not been the biggest fan, at least the one before Humanoid, which, I don't know, I can't even think of the name of that one. It's got the snake on it. But that one I thought was pretty decent. This new one, I don't know. I feel like they're kind of resting on their laurels. But yeah, this is really solid. Just classic heavy metal, great riffs. I pretty much ended up liking just about every song on here. And yeah, I definitely want to get some more classic Accept in my collection. If you're a big fan of, again, Judas Priest, I will just say Accept. I mean, this band's been around long enough, you can just say, yeah, if you like Accept, then there's pretty much a good chance you already own this one, since this one is definitely spoken of very highly in terms of their discography. But if you haven't checked it out for whatever reason, check it out. Just solid, classic, heavy metal, and just flat out fun songs to listen to. So yeah, check it out. Eternus, A Darker Monument. This is the 5th album from this Norwegian, well, I mean, they were black metal, and then they became like kind of like black and death metal, but honestly, I would say that this album is just straight up death metal. I'm a big fan of their first 2 albums, Beyond the Wandering Moon and So the Night Became. I think those are absolutely just amazing. Great riffs, great melodies, great hooks. We went over their most recent offering, Philosopher, which I thought was absolutely killer too. And that one definitely has more of a blackened death metal vibe to it. This is just flat out death metal, and I didn't hear any albums like directly before this. Like, I still kind of piecing together this band's discography, but this is almost like the reverse Uno card for Darkthrone, where, you know, Soulside Journey was flat out death metal, and then Blaze of the Northern Sky is a black metal classic. This band kind of just like, now we're switching gears from black metal to death metal very sharply. I would even go as far as to say like there really isn't even a hint of black metal on here. Like this is more comparable to like Incantation, Mortis Scald. It's riff driven, it's heavy, there are like almost more Death Doom breakdowns on it. The production is muddy and thick, you know, not a lot of that gainy sort of like more cold sound at all in the guitars. Actually, nothing on this album sounds particularly cold. The vocals are all death metal roars. About the only hint of black metal I found on here was the song The Trident, which it is very subtle and almost just there for atmosphere. But the rest of this, very much geared towards 90s death metal, and for the most part I really liked it. Like, you know, it's got kind of all the hallmarks of that sound that I like. I do think there are some issues with the vocals. Personally, I don't like it when they double the vocals because, I don't know, it just sounds odd. And on the second track, Slave State, there is this weird filter on them and like, I guess you could say like throat singing harmonies. It doesn't work. Luckily, the riffs on that song are pretty awesome, but the vocals just kind of put me off on that one. Soul Slayer was a big standout for me. Killer riffs across the board in that song, and a little bit more melodic flair, like kind of like the style of mellow death you would hear from like bands like Vehemence or Intestine Ballism, where it is still brutal as hell, but there are great melodies across the board. Those elements also show up a bit on Sons of War and Seen Through Arboreal Eyes, which are both solid songs. There's a good balance between blast beats and more groove-laden material. I gotta say, like, probably one of the big standouts in terms of just being just relentlessly heavy and quite a bit slower is Genocide Delight. That song, the main riff on there is just absolutely disgusting. Overall, I think it's a pretty good album. It definitely has some issues, again, namely with the vocals in there. But to their credit, I would say that they fully embraced death metal almost entirely on here, and they did it really well. But even going through like the reviews and the archives, I definitely sensed that there was like some division on this album and possibly this era of the band, because I think they kind of hung on to the sound for a little bit longer. Again, I'm not super familiar with their entire discography, and believe me, when I got this one, I was expecting something at least blackened tinged, and I really did not get that at all. In fact, as the album was going on, I was kind of wondering, it's like, dude, is there going to be like just like some cold tremolos to kind of spice this up at all? But again, they kind of nailed the sound, and if you're a big fan of Incantation, Mortis Scald, Accidental Suicide, maybe even a little bit of Immolation too, check this out. This is a solid death metal album from what I would say is predominantly more of a black and death / black metal band. So yeah, they did two styles really well, or technically three. I don't know, whatever. Check this out, it's a solid album. Ancient, Proxima Centauri. This is the 5th album from this Norwegian black metal act. I feel like every time I go down to Florida, I find an Ancient album, because I'm pretty sure the last time I went down there, I found an Ancient album as well. Now, I got in this band with their album Svartalheim, which I think is a pretty solid album. But as I've picked up more of their stuff, I've noticed that their discography can be a little bit uneven. I really wasn't a fan of the last one I picked up. Like, granted, it had more like gothic atmosphere to it, and there was some like, you know, creepy female clean vocals, which those definitely show up on here too. But I ended up being way more into this one, mainly because this one's way more riffy. Well, not the opening track because there's an intro, but the title track comes in like an Immortal song. Very riff driven, lots of thrashy riffs. There's a lot of like classic heavy metal, like harmonies and such on here. But at the same time, it still sounds like black metal. It's a bit more like well produced, like it's not super raw and gainy and all that shit. This band kind of mixes it up with all their influences, and I think they pull from a lot of different camps. It still has like some of the more theatrical elements, like there are interludes on here that are spooky but pointless, and the female vocals, it's a different vocalist on this one, and she does not only singing but like spoken word, and then there's actually some harsh vocals from her which are pretty decent. I do feel like at times it kind of gets lost in the theatrics, but it doesn't get as lost as it did on the Kenyan Chronicles, which I believe was the last one I picked up, which, yeah, you know, it's got a lot of like lavish elements. It's a very big sounding album, but it's also really cheesy, and cheese is still kind of a part of this. Like some of the synths on here sound particularly cheesy. The Witch and Eyes of the Dead in particular, they just sound out of place, and it kind of takes away from like, you know, whatever sort of like evil atmosphere you're trying to generate. And I mean, I'll be honest, the song Satan's Children, while I really like it, it doesn't necessarily fit, again, with that more spooky atmosphere. It's more like a classic heavy metal song with just like a black metal seasoning to it. It's good. It's got some killer riffs on it, but it doesn't necessarily scream, I worship the devil and burn churches, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure that wasn't this band's thing anyway, but whatever. They did at least kind of dress the part, so I don't know. Probably the biggest standout for me is the last track, Incarnating the Malignant Deity, which I think is a really awesome song. Well written. It's like over 9.5 minutes long. Lots of killer riffs and transitions. You get some more like slow brooding sections, faster sections with like killer, like again, more like thrash metal riffs kind of mixed in with like a black metal polish on it. I think that song really works in particular. I feel like there's just like some fat to trim on this and maybe just kind of dial back some of the theatrics and again, like stay way more focused on the riffs, because the songs that are focused on big riffy hooks are the ones that really stood out to me. If you're a big fan of Immortal, God, I would even say like maybe like earlier Cradle of Filth or earlier Dimmaborger too, kind of lurks in that realm as well. Check this out. Honestly, next to Svartalheim, this is probably my second favorite out of the ones that I've got so far. This actually comes together really nicely when it's not, you know, dicking about and trying to be like Shakespeare in the Park and Corpse Paint. So yeah, check it out. Pretty good, actually. Angst, or Angst, not really sure there. Molok, In Turmoil. This is a compilation from this German blackened crust hardcore act. I don't know, they're kind of all over the place in terms of their sound. It's very distant, it's very fast, it's very aggressive. And I became a big fan of this essentially one-man project with their album Ghost the Timeless Void years ago. Saw this in a used bin. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna get this because I've liked everything I've heard by this band. Now this is a compilation of their first album as well as some stuff from EPs and splits, I believe. Either way, it was stuff that I didn't own by this band, and I really don't see a lot of their albums kind of out in the wild, so it was really cool to actually find one just lurking in a used CD bin. And this band's sound is just flat out intense. Walls of distant guitars, lots of heavy down picking and D beats, going into blast beats. Now, while the songs, I guess, are kind of short, I don't know, there's a fair amount of songs in here that are a bit longer, and I think that is the black metal side or just the metal side of this band kind of drawing them out a bit. There are some tracks definitely with like more dynamics, more atmosphere, more groove to them. They do have their more crust punk elements, but I would say they lean a little bit more into like, you know, more metal territory. And lots of like just droning tremolo harmonies. There's a fair amount of stuff in here that reminds me of like Magua or Garia in terms of that more atmospheric black metal sound. But at the same time, the vibe of the album, like the whole feel of it, you know, especially with the vocals being more like hardcore bellows and roars, it definitely feels like it leans more on punk. And I'd have to say, like, you know, from what I've seen in terms of their themes, it's very socio-political, so that is definitely more of a punk trope than it is a black metal trope. There's even a couple of tracks in here that I would argue have like some kind of death metal elements. Turning Point was one that definitely just kind of brought a little bit more of those like chuggy kind of just, well, I mean, like flat out death metal riffs. And No More Words as well. There's just like a different vibe to those songs in terms of like, you know, the black metal elements kind of like getting replaced with like death metal or even just like more metallic hardcore overall. Honestly, every song in here I've managed to get into because it just kind of occupies a lot of different territories I like, and I think they blend all these styles well. And I like the fact that throughout this compilation you have songs that will favor one side more than the other. Like you have some songs that again are a little bit more hardcore centric, a little bit more black metal centric, some like flat out metallic hardcore, even some death metal sections. And for a 79-minute compilation, it's good that they kept this varied, because I probably would have lost interest if it was just like all D beats and down picks, or all just like one particular style, you know, just kind of slightly rearranged from track to track. Like this has got a lot of dynamics and a lot of killer songwriting, and, you know, surprising bit of like melody and even like some clean sections in it too. If you are, God, man, in terms of like big fans of, I would say like there's some comparisons to be drawn to like Converge on here. I would also even say Nails, but it's not quite as harsh as that. Like again, like a lot of distance, but it's more like black metal distance. It's, you know, more cold than flat out brutal, but this does have like just some ferocious hardcore moments on it too. I don't know, kind of hard to describe because they occupy a lot of different territory, but I definitely want to get more of their stuff in my collection, and I strongly recommend this comp if you find it. I also recommend Ghost of the Timeless Void if you can find that one as well. Check this band out. Solid, blackened, crust, metallic, hardcore, I don't know, whatever it is, it's pretty damn awesome. Apiary, Lost in Focus. This is the lone full length from this San Francisco base. Metallic hardcore, mathcore. I don't know, I've never really liked that term, but I suppose it's accurate. Anyway, that kind of band. Very short career, apparently. This was their only full length because 1 year later they would become the band Early Graves. And sadly, that band kind of had a short career, but I do believe they're still around. And that story, unfortunately, has a lot of tragedy in it. Anyway, I didn't even know this band existed. I didn't know Early Graves had a different name, essentially, at one point. And I saw that it was on Ironclad Recordings / Metal Blade, and I used to collect a lot of stuff that had Ironclad stamp on it because I loved a lot of the stuff they put out. Because that's Trevor from Unearth's label, and I'm a longtime Unearth fan, and generally that's enough for me to at least check it out. And I will say that the whole mathcore, math metal label, it does kind of fit. Like, there's a lot of stuff on here that is like straight up Dillinger, Botch, maybe like a little bit of like Into the Moat too, but it is balanced out with like just flat out metallic hardcore that's very similar to like Earth Crisis, God, I would say like Since the Flood too, bands like that. Nice gritty production. The guitars have a good tone to them. Great sounding drums, and I mean it kind of does what you would expect with like the bands I listed, like, and even Norma Jean too, like lots of those alarm clock squawky riffs, but they do balance it out with good like groovy breakdowns. There's occasionally even some clean breaks on there to kind of break up the cacophony of like polyrhythms and just like bonkers kind of like nonsensical noisy riffs. Bliss in Vain and Lustrum in particular are just sort of just crazy songs in terms of like the jagged transitions and just all the weird like kind of atonal squawky melodies that are going around, and vocally on top of that you have those kind of like ranting and raving growls, but he does kind of center in on a more like kind of mid-range growl. And the thing that I really liked about this is while it has all those like spazzy mathcore elements, it's not so firmly rooted in that style that it becomes sort of a jumbled mess, because at times Dillinger can be a little bit much for me. I still really like that band, but this band still knew how to like kind of bring you back to like a good solid groove or a good hook, or even just something that was a little bit more atmospheric or took time to build up rather than just explode into a fit of turnovers and, again, squawky riffs. The last track, Finding a Way Back in particular, is a really nice, moody, more atmospheric jam. It's not, trying to go absolutely nuts right out of the gate. I believe it's the longest track on there. It's also notably more groove-laden, and there's some really solid melodies in it. Now, I mean, naturally, I started comparing this to Early Graves because I was a really big fan of those first two albums. And this doesn't quite hit like it. I mean, granted, very different direction, very different vibe overall. Early Graves definitely went for an earlier sound, like there were elements of crust in there, and it was just more like straight up metallic hardcore. This one, a little bit more experimental, I guess you could say, but it's still very listenable. There's still a lot of good riffs on it. And I kind of dig this style overall, and it's been kind of fun revisiting a lot of metallic hardcore here lately. So overall, I'd say it's a pretty solid album if you're into that more like spazzy Botch, Norma Jean, Dillinger, Escape Plan style of metallic hardcore or mathcore, whatever you want to call it. I'm still not a big fan of that term. Check this out. Give it a whirl. Pretty solid stuff. Apocalypse Command, Damnation, Scythes of Invincible Abomination. That's a hell of a title. Anyway, this is the lone full length from this Tampa-based black and death metal act. This is one of Gene Palabicki's post-Angel Corpse projects he did. Actually, it kind of works as a transitional period into Perdition Temple, because it sounds remarkably alike. And, I mean, even Perdition Temple sounds a lot like Angel Corpse. This is technically a one-man project for Gene, or at least it was. He did have Cameron St. Clair from Diocletian on drums. And pretty much if you're familiar with Angel Corpse or Perdition Temple, then you already know exactly what this sounds like. This is Gene's style of like ferociously riffy black and death metal. Very thrashy but sinister riffs. It is just an onslaught of just riff after riff, blast beats aplenty. This album is fast-paced as hell. And yeah, they could have slapped the Perdition Temple logo on this, and it could have been the first Perdition Temple album. There really isn't a tremendous difference. I mean, I would say maybe the guitars have like a slightly deeper tone, or at least maybe the production's like slightly muddier maybe. Either way, you're still getting like the same effect. Like this is just, again, a non-stop battering of riffs and blast beats. Very little in the way of groove on here. There are some like thrashier sections where they break into like more gallops, but this is just like wall-to-wall intensity on every track. I do think the songs might be a little bit long for what they are. In Perdition Temple, I think he kind of wisely trimmed down some songs. I mean, there's still some longer songs in that discography too, but these songs just often get like way too busy and way too like, I wouldn't say like technical, but too intricate and too just on the nose, speedy throughout the entire thing, that they just become, I don't know, like kind of static in the background. So you get a lot of songs that kind of really run together because they all kind of have the same elements. You know, even Gene's vocals are kind of the same from track to track. I do like the vocal dynamics on Into Atomic Hell. There's just something a little bit different about them that kind of makes them stand out, and that's good because while all these songs I think are very enjoyable, they don't really stand out. And you know, Gene's just a hell of a guitar player. Like his riff work is just amazing. But I think on this one, he might have been trying to like just cram as many of these awesome riffs as he could into like longer songs. And unfortunately, some of them just kind of get like lost in the shuffle. So this is almost like a transitional period between Angel Corpse and Perdition Temple. And I feel like it kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. In fact, I didn't know this band existed until I found it in a used bin in Florida. And while I think it is a good listen in terms of like just finding something flat out intense to jam from start to finish, like this album is a no breaks run, it doesn't quite stand out as much in terms of like, you know, Angel Corpse and Perdition Temple in terms of like, you know, intricacies, riffs, dynamics, songs that stand apart. This one just comes across as furious, but, you know, not super distinct. But again, if you're a fan of Gene's work, Gene's riff style, and, you know, just like the bands that he's been in, I recommend it. It fits right in with all that. I just don't think it's as good as at least two of his other bands that I absolutely love. But it does kind of work as like a stopgap between Angel Corpse and Perdition Temple, and I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, vicious as hell, as to be expected from Gene. And of course, if you haven't checked out Angel Corpse or Perdition Temple, I strongly recommend those. But yeah, this one was still pretty good too. Apostasy, Blood That Covers All Sin EP. This is the debut EP from this San Diego-based melodic death doom act. I picked this one up as a blind buy, and probably should have looked into it a little bit more, or kind of maybe read into the album top, because this is Christian death doom, which I didn't know really existed. I mean, granted, you know, I know some Christians that get down the dumps and like heavy music, and Christianity makes for really good dark subject matter. Just ask Trouble. But this one was like $2 when I saw it. I was like, you know, why not? Why not buy more music? That's generally how I go into record stores, especially if I see something modestly priced. And this is not very good. There's probably a reason why there was a $2 tag on it. Lots of dreary but very cheesy sounding synths. The guitar tone on here is flat out awful. Like when you think of death doom, you generally think of a heavy, suffocating tone that is just oppressive as hell. Like that, I feel, is very necessary in death doom. And the guitar tone on here is thin, listless, and just has this terrible gainy sizzle. It sounds like insect wings flapping right against your ears. There's nothing super hefty about them at all. The vocals are decent, like he's got a, you know, alright roar, but they are monotonous as hell. They do not change one bit on this EP. And there are at least moments where the music shifts a little bit from like, you know, a more heavy, oppressive section, or at least as heavy and as oppressive as you can get with a Fisher-Price guitar tone, to like something more melodic and atmospheric. Either way, the vocals never change, but, well, a lot of this EP just doesn't change. A lot of the songs have the same drum pattern to them, which I will say that this is a one-man project, and I would say you can kind of pick up where this one gentleman wasn't as proficient, because the drums really lack any creativity. It's almost the same drum beat for every song, and even the fills feel very basic, kind of rudimentary in terms of like transitioning over the song in terms of like a break. Like they do it, but they don't do it with any flash. And in terms of songwriting, the songs just kind of meander around like the same melodies and harmonies, and again that same drum pattern. Like they hang on to moments for way too long, like draw out everything. It feels like a modern Iron Maiden song. I'm sorry to all the modern Iron Maiden fans, but a lot of their modern output just fucking drags. But to their credit, at least in moments they know how to make it interesting because they're very talented songwriters and players. And we're not necessarily saying this guy's like absolutely terrible, but he doesn't know how to like keep the song moving or keep it interesting, which in a way kind of does sound like me shitting on him. I don't know, maybe I kind of am. I don't know. This was just a very, I don't know, like lazy, dull listen, hampered by, again, bad production, but also just boring songwriting. Like even with better production, I'd be like, dude, go somewhere, go someplace different, try something different, switch up a drum pattern or something, change the vocals a little bit here and there. Like this is just stuck in one gear throughout the entire listen, which is thankfully pretty short. So yeah, I'm not a fan. I think this was just kind of there, and I think I lost $2 technically, and some time, because I did listen to this. But yeah, I mean, who knows? There might be some fans of this out there. I mean, it kind of does fall in line with like some of the peaceful death doom, or at least it really tried to. Maybe like early Catatonia, or like Paradise Lost by a Dying Bride. Maybe that, not as good. 100% gonna say that. But still, I mean, if you're curious, of course, I'm gonna leave links down in the description, so if you want to check it out on your own, you can 100% do that, but I'm probably not going to listen to this one again. Argus, this is their self-titled debut album. This was a Pennsylvania-based epic doom metal act. I've been a fan since their second album, Boldly Stride the Doomed, and everything I've picked up by this band has been awesome, and that includes this one right here. This was the only one that I was missing because sadly, this band has gone defunct once again. I guess they've had a history of breakups and reformations. But as of this point, as far as full lengths, their discography is complete for me, and this album is absolutely amazing, just like all of their stuff. This band kind of latches right onto that Solitude Eternus, Candlemass style, big, epic, heavy metal harmonies mixed with these just woeful, doomy sections. Their vocalist, Butch, has such a fantastic voice. It is both gruff and tuneful. He conveys all of the epic doominess so well with every vocal passage, and man, the guitar work in this band is fantastic. Surprisingly very heavy at points too, like getting down to like some really hefty chugs. The guitar tone is very beefy. It's a little bit dirtier than I would say it is on later albums for this one. The songs are just catchy as hell. Honestly, it reminds me of like a more doom-centric version of The Sword. Every riff has a hook. They're really clever about the harmonies that go in there, and nothing comes across as cheesy, at least in my opinion. It sounds very earnest, very emotional. It sounds like they're very vested in the subject matter, and the music is just so dynamic. It's huge. I mean, it's epic doom. It should be. You have tons of songs that sound like they are striding into battle to battle. I don't know, it's doom, so I don't know, maybe happiness. But then you have songs that just flat out bring the doom, the heft, the darkness, the woefulness. None Shall Know the Hour. That one in particular, I would say, is one of the heaviest tracks in the album. It's brooding. It's definitely more sullen sounding. Butch's vocals almost sound like he has taken a eulogy and turned it into a song. It's absolutely amazing. But the big standouts for me are the last two songs. The instrumental, The Effigy Is Real, which is just riff city. Like, it is just a jam session packed with killer riffs, great harmonies. It's catchy as hell. But the last song, The Outsider, huge, doomy epic to close us out. There's even a bridge with spoken word, and it sounds just extra sinister. And that whole song, giant riff buffet. And riffs win. Riffs always win with me. In terms of metal, I think like riffs are the best diplomat. Anyone can get behind a riff, and this band emulates that, or emulated. I guess, you know, they broke up fairly recently. I got their last one, which was fantastic, and I believe all of their artwork was done by Brad Moore. legend. But they had like a period of dormancy for a while, broke up, and then they came back, and I guess they're defunct again, which sucks because I love everything that I have heard from this band. And yeah, great to actually have the debut now. If you were a big fan of Solitude Aeternus and Trouble and Candlemass, like just that kind of stuff in general, check this album out, and then just check out the rest of this band's discography. In my opinion, there's nothing but bangers in that discography, but that's just me. But either way, check this out. Killer album. Astra, The Weirding. This is the debut album from the San Diego-based psychedelic rock / progressive rock outfit. I have their follow-up album, The Black Horde, which I think is their last album. This band kind of went defunct a while ago, but I saw this one. I've been meaning to get it for a while just because they kind of occupy some fun, weird, proggy territory that I love to explore. It's very much firmly latched on like 70s prog rock, so I mean, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, yes. Maybe a little bit of Rush, but maybe a little bit more, again, of that more experimental stuff. I would say like King Crimson too. Lots of Moog synths, lots of weird transitional atmospheric sections, and you know, very fuzzy guitars and, you know, kind of trippy solos. There's definitely some Pink Floyd in here too. And I absolutely love this. This is a spacey, cosmic journey of drawn out, you know, but not like long-winded jams to the point where they kind of drag. They constantly keep moving. They're just, you know, very, I don't know, immersive sounding. You can kind of get lost in the music itself. It's predominantly instrumental too. There are some spots of vocals, which the vocals sound oddly like they're from England. They are most definitely not. But regardless, it all sounds very spacey and cosmic, like, I don't know, somewhere between like Yes and Hawkwind. Like, it doesn't get like too like weird like Hawkwind often does, but it's also maybe like a little bit more strange than some Yes albums. I don't know. I got some more Yes albums while I was down there too, spoiler alert, so we'll go over them eventually. But I just love the way this sounds. It's very analog sounding. The riffs have that kind of like classic 70s rock tone. Everything is very warm and very lush. There are some softer, more intimate moments like Silent Sleep, but a lot of these songs, again, big dynamics, you know, starting off very clean and soft, setting up, you know, an atmosphere, a setting, and then going into these just huge songs with just brilliant songwriting on here. And the way it sounds, it almost feels like a live performance. Like this was just all of them in the studio and they just jammed it all at once, and bam, you have this amazing performance. Like, it doesn't sound like this was done, you know, by like tracking everyone individually. It feels like this kind of came across as like an organic jam session where they just kind of went where the music took them. Definitely not metal, despite being on Metal Blade and Rise Above Records. It's way more in that classic 70s rock vibe, but fantastic listen from start to finish. And if you like this, I strongly recommend getting their second album too. It sucks that this band is on indefinite hiatus. I would 100% get more by them for sure. Like, this brings me back to my mom putting on like Yes albums and Hawkwind albums and, you know, maybe some Pink Floyd too, and just kind of sitting and watching her get into the music, and then me slowly really getting into it as well, especially on the instrumental jams, just because they're so fluid and fun. Ouroboros and Beyond to Slight the Maze, those two songs in particular are absolutely fantastic. If you're a fan of, again, like classic prog rock, psychedelic rock, and I would even say like, you know, like the stoner rock and stoner metal fans would probably dig this. It just has kind of that vibe that, you know, we're kind of used to. Check this out. Killer album. And again, check out their follow-up too. It's also really good. And finally, we have Attitude Adjustment, American Paranoia, and More. Now, this comp came out in 1993, though this is a reissue of their 1986 album. This is a crossover thrash band from the Bay Area. Actually featured Chris Contos, currently in Forbidden, who was also in Machine Head for a while. And this was kind of a blind buy because I legit had no idea that this band existed. And I feel like I've been missing out on some absolutely killer old school crossover, because that is exactly what this is. The songs are short, furious, they're punkier in hell. Like, this screams like classic DRI, like dealing with it energy. Some SOD, some cryptic slaughter, like the very early run of crossover thrash when it was just, you know, a bunch of like angsty, punky kids that are just learning metal riffs and finding out how to incorporate them. that sort of energy. Everything on this album is just short and furious and a lot of fun. The production is a bit gritty, and you do kind of gotta crank it a bit because it does feel a little bit muted, but man, these songs are awesome, especially the ones that leaned a little bit more towards metal, at least for me. Especially songs like Dope Fiend, Johnny, which is the longest track on there. I think it's the only one that cracked the 3-minute mark. Tons of like killer thrash metal riffs on there. Like, it kind of puts a lot of the punk stuff a little bit more on the back burner, and it's just an absolutely badass song, and incredible end as well. Lots of dark humor. Like, if you are very much in line with the humor on Speak English or Die, then you'll probably enjoy this, especially the song DSFA, which stands for Doesn't Stand for Anything. It's one of the shortest tracks, but I like the fact that it's just sort of a joke track, and it ends with an echo of SMD, which, if you own Carnivore's second album, you know exactly what those initials stand for. The only reason I'm not saying is because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube again. So yeah, the entire American Paranoia side in here, I think, is awesome. Like, it just captures that crossover energy that is just often emulated, but there's something special about the earlier stuff where it just sounded like, you know, pissed off kids, and to the point where they almost sound exhausted. Like, the vocals on here, like, I swear at the end of some of these songs, the dude's just like kind of panting and wheezing because he's just kind of let out all of the fuck you dad energy that he had. Crossover's pace is generally just recklessly fast, and I love that. Now, the and more section of this is a collection of demos, and the demos are raw as hell. But it's kind of fun just because you can picture this band essentially just like clicking record on a tape deck and just jamming around. It's like, all right, that's our demo. That's exactly what it needs to sound like. It's supposed to sound raw. It's supposed to sound live. And we packed enough rage and socio-political awareness in here that I'm pretty sure venues maybe gonna book us. I don't know. But out of the demos, the song 9 to 5 Religion really stood out to me, not only for being a very snarky commentary on religion, but just for being an absolutely vicious song. This absolutely rules, and this was one of my favorite finds that I got down in Florida, just because I feel like this is a band I should have known about years ago. In fact, I was on a stream recently with Dennis at the Analog Archives, and he brought this band up, and I thought about saying, yeah, I finally got into that band, but I wanted to save it for a collection update. But yeah, excellent find, great band. I think they have a couple of more albums. I'm really not sure. I gotta look into it more, you know, as this is just my first exposure to them, but killer stuff. If you're a big fan of SOD, MOD, DRI, other bands that are anagrams, and I would say Cryptic Slaughter and early Corrosion and Conformity, check this out. You will probably dig this. And that knocks out this collection update. The next one will be predominantly stuff that I got in Florida as well, and some stuff that I got, well, actually just kind of showed up on my doorstep because I had ordered it before I left, and luckily someone was here to pick it up and put it inside the house. But yeah, this particular Florida run's going to take quite a few collection updates to get through, but I'm pretty sure I got a lot of stuff that I think you guys will probably be pretty interested in. Either way, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have hats too. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below. And of course, thank you guys so much for all of your support, the comments, the shares, the likes, all that matters, all of it keeps us going, and we are eternally grateful for every bit of help you guys have given us. Tons of content coming. I think by the time that I shoot this, we theoretically should have the Meshuggah ranking shot, and at the end of that, we should have a selection process for at least a voting thing for bands that we're going to go over. More of the usual, of course, reviews, collection updates, states of metal, other stuff that I plan on doing. And I think, again, as John has been saying, we do want to do some more like topical videos, like just discuss a broad topic in metal or adjacent to metal. That was a lot of fun. It's some kind of different for us, and it seemed like it got the conversations going in the comments, which I think that's absolutely awesome. So yeah, we're gonna try our hand at some other subjects as well. But yeah, one more big thank you, because you guys are absolutely awesome, and we will catch you later.